Hi, and welcome to the Right to Remain Silent podcast. I'm Jim Weber, your host and guide through actual accounts of intriguing and fascinating true crime stories as told by the law enforcement professional that experienced the event. The Right to Remain Silent podcast makes no exaggeration of fact, doesn't glamorize details, or sensationalize reality. The format here is basic. Real stories from real cops. Lastly, please don't forget to like, follow, subscribe, and share. Doing this will help me continue to provide you, the listener, with captivating and relevant true crime stories. Now, let's listen in on today's episode. Hi, I'd like to welcome you to the Right to Remain Silent podcast, where we delve into the riveting world of true crime with firsthand insights from those individuals that are dedicated and have dedicated their lives to law enforcement. I'm your host, Jim Weber, and today I'm going to guide you through the captivating story that we have today from our guest, Victor Avila. Victor, hey, I want to thank you for taking the time to talk with us today.
Thank you, Jim. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Sure, absolutely. I think I want to jump right in and just go over your bio here so listeners are familiar with who we're talking to today, if that's all right.
That sounds great.
All right, excellent. Mr. Victor Avila is a retired supervisory special agent with Homeland Security Investigations, HSI, under ICE. He is also the author of Agent Under Fire, A Murder and Manifesto, and National Ambassador for Veterans for America First. HSI is responsible for investigating crimes involving immigration, trade, customs, and border security that threaten the security of the American homeland. While serving with HSI, Victor personally led criminal investigations of human traffickers, drug smugglers, and violent criminals. During his time with ICE and HSI, Victor also served as an accredited diplomat to Mexico, Spain, and Portugal. Victor advised these governments on complex and wide-ranging criminal investigations, including narcotics trafficking, arms trafficking, human trafficking, financial violations, commercial fraud, and counterterrorism. While on official assignment in Mexico, Special Agent Avila suffered multiple gunshot wounds and survived a violent ambush by the Mexican Los Zetas Drug Cartel, where Special Agent Jaime Zapata tragically lost his life. Since retiring from HSI, Victor has spoken across the United States, continuously advocating for border security solutions and public safety. Victor has also authored Agent Under Fire, A Murder Manifesto, recounting the story of the 2011 ambush by cartel hitmen and outlining a strategy to secure the border. In 2020, Victor also set the world record for the longest handgun shot. That is quite an impressive bio. He currently resides in Texas with his wife, Claudia, and two children, Sophia and Victor Emilio. He remains actively engaged in the community and civic affairs. Like I said, that is a very impressive bio, Victor.
Well, thank you. Thank you for reading that, Jim. It's always come with a lot of passion, a lot of hard work and dedication. But because I always loved my job, but always had the support of my family to do it. And I'm here by the grace of God to be able to continue to at least try to give something back to the community, my state of Texas and our nation. But I've been at this since I was 22 years old. I started as a state parole officer, got introduced to the underworld of the criminal justice system and
Sure.
and criminals and that culture that a lot of people are just not aware of that lives amongst us. And I supervise really violent offenders. I went, when I started, I was one of those people that thought that when people went to prison, they stayed there forever. And the reality is that the majority, if almost not all of them, get released at one point or another, and they are going to be in your community. And these are sometimes very, very bad people, sex offenders, violent offenders, gang members, you name it. And so that's what I got introduced to. Then I went from that state level to doing it at the federal level for the United States courts as a federal probation officer. And that not only was the supervision, but then I learned the court system, the federal sentencing guidelines, and in San Antonio. And I got introduction to the lawyers, the objections, the assistant U.S. attorney, and that system that, believe it or not, was very, very instrumental in shaping me as a criminal investigator, because I knew that side of the court system. A lot of times, police officers, agents, we don't have that exposure. When you slap cuffs on somebody, it's just the beginning of a whole other criminal justice system, the other side of it, right? And sometimes agents and we're unfamiliar with that part of it. And I really had that advantage when I applied to become a U.S. Customs Service Special Agent. I thought I was going to be a federal probation officer for 20 years. It's a good job. It's nice. But after interviewing and dealing with the special agents for these pre-sentence reports, I became friends with a lot of them and really at one point I said, I really want to do what these guys do. And so I applied for the U.S. Customs Service. I got hired. And when I got hired, this is when DHS was just created. DHS was created in 2003, yes. And I went to the academy. It was still a U.S. Customs Academy. And they kind of interjected a little bit of immigration, but I was one of the first ones of the academies there was nobody at the academy, by the way. There was 2 classes when I was there. So FLETC was basically empty.
Kind of a ghost town.
It was a very unique situation. I actually got hired during a hiring freeze, which is weird. And it was a long, long academy, 22 weeks long. It was a whole football season. We were there from preseason all the way to the Super Bowl. The weekend.
Right.
I mean, not kidding. That's exactly the time I spent over there.
That's a long time.
It's a long time. And I graduated with U.S. Customs, Department of Treasury Special Agent credentials, but my certificate said Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Man, you went through the mass confusion.
Right, exactly.
I got assigned to the El Paso office. It's all customs, everybody, customs rate jackets, all that.
Sure.
And then I think it took, I forget, maybe 8 to 10 months or a year in, they finally issued the ICE Special Agent badge.
It took a while, yeah. But
it took a while, and then, as you know, there was a big identity crisis because nobody knew who the heck ICE was. And then you had these 2 very distinct divisions of ICE. You had an ICE officer and you had an ICE special agent, which have nothing to do with each other than, yes, we intertwine here and there, but very different duties. And nobody knew who was who, especially the media, right? They thought we're all the same. They all thought we were deportation officers, which we were not. And so in 2010, I think, is when it officially became HSI, Homeland Security Investigations, to give the criminal investigators a more of a solid identity as to what we do. Because for those of you who don't know, HSI is identifies and investigates all these crimes that have a nexus to the border. If it touches the border, we have a jurisdiction to look into it and investigate it. So all the smugglings, all the traffickings, all the frauds, that's a lot. That's a lot of jurisdictions, a lot of laws there that are covered here. And sometimes I think the people are just caught with the immigration part, but the whole commercial fraud, when I was in Europe, the cultural artifacts, I mean, we were going into some stuff that I had never even thought about that we did, but we did do.
Sure.
Recovering stuff from museums and really cool stuff anyway. But nevertheless, the big ones were obviously the trafficking. So when I got to El Paso, got assigned to a drug group. Narcotics Conspiracy Group 2, and I love the group. I also didn't know that not every HSI agent was Title 21 designated, meaning that they had the authority to investigate drugs. I'm telling you, Jim, I didn't know this for several years, and I'll tell you how I found out until I went and arrested somebody in Denver for a cocaine warrant that I had out of them. Went and picked them up, and I thought, well, I need an agent from Denver. Well, they're like, oh, we only have 5. I said, what do you mean you only have 5? We only have 5 cross-designated agents in Denver. I didn't know that DEA only gave so many designations.
Right, that was a strange concept.
By the way, that's in the. I know it's been dealing with in Congress to give all HSI agents Title 21 authority, which I fully support, but because with the fentanyl and everything else that's going on. But anyway, so a lot of drugs, did some good work there in El Paso. I'm from El Paso, born and raised. I know the Mexican side, and so being back there was very advantageous to me. I knew the prosecutors, I knew the public defenders, I knew the courts, I knew the police officers, I know the streets, and it made my job very fun, a lot of fun. And then one day, out of the blue, my boss, my supervisor, Kenny Williams, God rest his soul, says on a Friday afternoon, you're going to the human smuggling, human trafficking group. And man, I didn't take it well, man. I didn't take it well.
What were your thoughts there?
I didn't know anything about human smuggling. I didn't know anything about I didn't even know what human trafficking was. And
right. And there's so much confusion today. What's trafficking? What's smuggling?
I'm gonna tell you, because now that's my subject matter expertise. So I went over there, and my boss, he told me, he says, Victor, you're gonna have to learn this. You're gonna have to learn this. This is the future. You have to learn this. And it just so happened that there's a task force that was in El Paso. It was led by FBI, the Human Trafficking Task Force, and eventually I took over that, and I ran the Human Trafficking Task Force. I got heavily trained in human trafficking investigations. I also worked a lot of human smuggling cases. One of the biggest cases that I worked that kind of made my name at the office was, unfortunately, a corruption case against a Border Patrol agent who was allowing illegal aliens to go through the checkpoints there in Texas and southern New Mexico. And so I took that whole organization down. It was a great case. And then I was doing a lot of human trafficking. I was getting trained. I was trying to do proactive cases. In the middle of all that, I really wanted to do financial investigations. And so I got trained I went to the financial school in San Diego, and I got into the financial group. And now we're looking at the, Bank Secrecy Act and the SARS and the
Sure, all the complexities report, there.
All that good stuff, which, they always told us, follow the money. And so that's what we wanted to do. And we started working that. And this is now several years into my career. And then in 2008, there was an opportunity to go over into Mexico, into Ciudad Juarez, right across the border. And if you remember, 2008 was when that city was the most dangerous city in the world. And the Juarez cartel had a stronghold on the entire narcotic system in the entire world. Amado Carrillo Fuentes, and then his brother took over when he died. Vicente Carrillo Fuentes, and that organization really controlled the entirety. They were making $10 billion a year in proceeds. And we had 2 agents assigned to the Juarez office. Now, in Juarez, the consulate, it was this old building. And so the DEA and ICE were actually in a private building. They weren't even in a secure building with some attorneys and some I think architects and stuff. And when I went over, that's where the office was. That's where I would drive over to the port of entry in the morning. They would pick me up in an armored vehicle, and I would go work there all day till come back 9, 10 o'clock at night. They drop me off at the port of entry in El Paso, and I would go home. And that's how the TDY was. And the brand new building, which is now still in effect there, the brand new consulate in Ciudad Juarez, which by the way is one of the big hubs where all the permits and visas are issued. It's a very, very busy area there. Was about to be inaugurated and finished, and we couldn't wait to get in there. And it was perfect timing because right before we moved in there was a dead body that the cartel dumped in front of the office with a label directed to DEA, knowing that we know you're in this building. I mean, they knew that we were in this building, and there was a lot of deaths, 350 homicides per month. Per month.
That's astounding. That's astounding.
If you think about that statistic, it was just death surrounding us. The city was in lockdown after 7 p.m. The only people out there was the cartel, the military, and us. I don't know what we were doing out there, but it was an eye-opening for me because now I got to really see the expansion of these cases. I got to see the bridges hanging from the bodies hanging from the bridges. I saw the bodies being excavated from these the cartels, these narco, where they bury these people all over the place, and because all these bodies, you got to put them somewhere.
Right. If I could interject here, you and I worked for the same agency for our entire careers. And, I worked on an interior office. And for the listeners, that's an office that's not along the border of the United States. It was in the interior. And I worked in the Midwest, and I would hear the stories that you're recounting here. We would, after the fact, we would hear about these things, about the bodies, hanging from the bridges, the beheadings, the bodies thrown in front of buildings, the threats and intimidation. While I was in the interior hearing about it, you were down in the middle of it, along the border and in Mexico. So that in itself is fascinating. That, we could talk forever, probably.
We could compare. I'm sure we could compare notes because
sure.
We had a lot of connection to the Midwest because of drugs. They all come into the United States. We did a lot of controlled deliveries up to Chicago, up to these areas. A lot of them. That's what we did. A lot of those, and so. Eventually we got into the consulate there, and it was just a tremendous amount of work. At one point there was an opportunity to go to Mexico City and for a case, an arms trafficking case. I'd never been to Mexico City, and I told my supervisor, I said, hey, let me go, man. I'll be the note taker. I don't care. I just want to go on the trip.
Sure.
And he came back and said, why don't you take the whole delegation? And I said, I'll take them. And I took them all, and I ran the meeting in Mexico City. It was successful. I fell in love with the city. It was very, very, you see, I grew up on the border, and the border is very different than Mexico City. It's very different. Mexico City, if you've never been, you got everything there. Yes, you got the poor, you got the crime, you got the people, but you also got this nice New York vibe to it. Sure. Very industrialized, very modern. And I'm like, sometimes I think, this is Mexico? Yes, it is. And so very posh, very nice, very, they put these people. I had a friend there that was a DEA agent assigned there. He drove me around. I said, hey, I could do this. This is pretty cool.
Sure.
And so my TDY, believe it or not, from that case, switched over to the Mexico City office because they needed help there. They needed a lot of help. Mexico was the busiest office that whole time. It was a very, very busy office, as you can imagine. And I stayed there. And then eventually, the stars align in your career. There was a position open for an ICE rep. I put in for it. I got it. Eventually, we went through the State Department and all the backgrounds and stuff that we have to do. My family, I had my wife and my kids, and we consciously said, let's go. And before you know it, we all showed up in Mexico City and lived there.
That's a fascinating story, and how it unfolded, and how you were assigned along the border there, and then you kind of dipped your toe in the water with the TDY there in Juarez, and then transitioning to Mexico City. I have not been to Mexico City, but I've got many friends and many coworkers like yourself that have been there and said the exact same things about it. So how long were you assigned to Mexico City? How long were you there?
I was there for 2 years. I was there for 2 years. My assignment, and I'll tell you, because I'll share something that a lot of people don't know. I don't share this a lot. But I had been promoted, and I'll go into the shooting right now. It happened in 2011, but I had been recently promoted, and I was going to go open the office in Merida, in the Yucatan Peninsula, which we were excited. My wife was excited. I covered a lot of that area anyway, which is Merida Peninsula, Cancun, all the way down where all the smuggling, all the crap has happened to this day, by
Right.
the way. And so I had those contacts already, and I was kind of one of those, you know how it is, and as an agent, you kind of go talk. I did talk to my attaché, and in this case, when you become a little bit more senior and tenured, you get to kind of approach your supervisor a little bit with a little bit more confidence,
Right.
and I did. I said, listen, this, this is for me. I don't know who else would be able to do this, but I've been already basically been doing it. And they can't tell you it's going to be yours, but basically wink, wink, nod, nod, it's going to be yours. And
Right.
so, yeah, my whole career path, goal was to do my 5 years there. Because it's a 5-year tour, but they split them up. They split them up in the first 2 years, then you have to kind of reapply, or what they call it, re-up. And
Hmm.
then I think they do, I don't, I forget the formula, 2-1, and then 3, or whatever it is, 2-2, whatever it
Right.
is, 2-2-1, however it is. But then I was gonna re-up and then go open the office, and I was be the head of the office there in Merida. Obviously, that didn't happen, so it's very bittersweet. But you know,
Sure.
but very
Well,
very
let's.
busy in Mexico.
Yep. Yeah. What's you and you mentioned it here just a minute ago, the shooting incident that you were involved in. So let's, if you're comfortable with it, let's transition into that. Let's discuss that and what events led to that occurring, like what the assignment was, who
Yeah.
was with you, and ultimately what happened in the aftermath. And I'd like to just open the floor to you to explain or describe to the listeners what you experienced and what happened in that tragic incident.
Yeah, Mexico was I can't stress it enough. It was very chaotic in the sense of the amount of work. I want people to understand um it was overwhelming, but in a way where I loved it. I liked it. I enjoyed it. I neglected my family. I was never home. Some months I was home 2, 3 days out of the month.
Wow.
Which is it's just tough. It's tough on the family.
Sure.
It's getting tough on
It's
my marriage.
right.
And but I love what I was doing, and it's hard to explain. I write
Oh
about this
no,
in the
I completely understand. Yeah.
and people in law enforcement, and believe me, when I speak to these police groups, and they get it, and
Yeah.
and it's a weird feeling to explain, but you're trying to do, even when I was home, my wife's like, "You're here, but you're not here." But the
Right.
reason why I tell you that is because we were so busy that I had just actually come back from, I was in the States working a big Afghan smuggling case. Yes, Afghans in Mexico back then.
Really? Okay.
Yes. And we were about to take them down. I had debriefed the source. That's a cool story in itself, how that came about. But I debriefed the source in Tucson, Arizona, who we had incorporated into Mexico and got us everything. We had everything ready to go. These guys were moving Afghans and arms and drugs. And I was in Tucson, Arizona. This is the Thursday before the shooting happened on a Tuesday. This is the Thursday before. I said, wait a minute, I'm in Tucson, Arizona. I was done. And instead of driving to Phoenix and flying back to Mexico City, I was a travel guru. Believe me, I traveled so much. My name at the office was Trips because I
You probably
traveled
racked
so
up
much.
some points, travel points.
Just a little bit, just a little bit. I was a royal ambassador, whatever. But it's not because people think, oh, you travel, it's so fun. No, it's work. It's work, 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 work.
Right.
And my wife would struggle a little bit with that, like, why do you travel so much? Because that's how it is. That's how the cases take me. And because I always liked to work. I was a working agent, and I say that a lot. People are like, what do you mean you're a working agent? I worked. Not everybody
Right.
works.
Yeah, there's agents out there that they have the title and they're an agent, and then there's agents out there that work hard and enjoy it and are effective.
And I'm very proud of being one of those. And so
Yep.
I like to work. And so for me in Mexico, it meant a lot of travel. It meant Central America, all of Mexico, and the U.S. And so I turned in the car, I rented my own car and drove from Tucson to El Paso, and my parents live in El Paso, and I surprised my parents that Thursday, and I had an incredible weekend with my family, my friends, ex-coworkers from the El Paso office. It was very, very surreal when I look back at it, because it was kind of almost like a goodbye, saying goodbye to work. I saw my aunt, I saw these family members. It was a great weekend. Anyway, I go back to Mexico City from Juarez. I fly back from Juarez to Mexico City on Sunday night, very late. I get into my apartment, Mexico City, at 1 a.m. Now it's Monday morning, February 14th, 2011, Valentine's Day.
Sure.
And I go to the office around 9 a.m. I am really need to catch up with a lot of my administrative work. You know, we all, everything that we do, we have to write it down and we have to do reports. And so,
One day of work equals 2 or 3 days of admin time.
and so I still have it here. I'm a big note taker and little notes, and I used to write everything down because there's so much stuff going on. We didn't have iPhones back then, so now I would write everything down. And so I wrote a to-do list for the whole week, and it was this incredible list of things that I needed to do.
I can imagine,
A lot. And so I needed to catch up, and that's what I was going to use that entire week to do. And right around lunchtime, well, actually before, like around noon, because lunchtime in Mexico City is at 2 p.m., more or less, between 2 and 3. And around noon, my coworker tells me, hey, heads up, they're going to send you to Monterey. And I said, what the F? Why am I in Monterey? I just got
what's
back.
up with that? Right.
I've been gone almost a week, man. I need to, there's other agents in this office, so I didn't like it. And he says, hey, that's what I heard in the meeting. I'm just letting you know. Okay. Go to lunch, come back around 3. And sure enough, my supervisor calls me in and says, hey, I need you and to take they refers to Special Agent Jaime Zapata as a TDYer, because Agent Zapata was TDY to Mexico City. He was TDY from the Laredo office because the Laredo office was working a big arms trafficking case. It was such a big case that we had been helping them. We were on a wire. We had set up everything for them, but we didn't have the manpower in Mexico ourselves to work the case. So we started bringing in their own agents to work their case, and we would set them up, and they were doing 30, 60, 90-day TDYs.
Yep, I was going to interject there. And for the listeners, a TDY, like you just said, it's a temporary assignment where an agent is brought from their home office to an office that's in need of extra bodies and extra help. So I just wanted to throw that in there.
That's perfectly explained. That's exactly what they were doing. And Jaime had just arrived as a supplement or relief for another agent that had just gone out, and he was there the week before. And they said, I need you to go pick up some boxes and some equipment from our guys, our ISI agents from the Monterey office. And I'm like, well, what? I'm kind of like, wait, put the brakes on it. What's going on? And so I get on the phone with my friend, the assistant attaché in Monterey, and I said, what's going on? First of all, let me tell you, Mexico is not a safe country. You cannot drive on this highway. And when I say the word highway, people think it's this isolated. That's just what it's called over there. But it's the freeway. It's the interstate. Think of it of the I-95, wherever you live, I-10, I-5, I-20, I-95, I-70.
Sure.
It's the main corridor, it's the toll road from Mexico City to Texas. And we knew that area, especially the one closer to Texas, was controlled by Los Zetas Cartel. We knew that. And everybody knew that. As a matter of fact, the ambassador had gotten the word of it, and the intelligence and the diplomatic security special agents, and the ambassador had put out an alert weeks before, about 2 or 3 weeks before this date, not allowing any U.S. citizen personnel from the embassy to drive on that highway for any reason, for personal reasons or business reasons. You couldn't unless you had written permission from the ambassador himself.
So that's pretty serious stuff there.
I have the memo.
And,
I have the alert.
could you, for the listeners, could you again tell us the Zetas cartel? Just give us a brief synopsis of what that is.
So Los Zetas Cartel, a very, very violent cartel. Los Zetas Cartel made their name. They used to be the enforcers for the Gulf Cartel, and they're kind of these ex-military, paramilitary, military members that some of them were trained, and they were trained in Guatemala. They were trained in southern Mexico. Some of them were trained by the U.S. And these guys were initially the security enforcers for the Gulf Cartel, and then eventually branched out and became their own cartel. And the reason they became they got a lot of notoriety and a lot of power is because of the level of violence. They're the ones that introduced this medieval chopping off of heads, skinning people alive, burning them alive, doing these horrific, horrific things on video so people could see and intimidate them, kind of like terrorists, right? And they started gaining a lot of power. And of course, the corridor, the area there in southern portion of Texas and Mexico, where they would bring in the marijuana, cocaine, and that type of stuff. So these guys were moving in from the Monterrey, Mexico area all the way to San Luis Potosí. As a matter of fact, they had the town of San Luis Potosí, the state, under their control. And San Luis Potosí, if you look at the map, it's in the middle of the country. It's not on the border anymore. And these guys were very influential and had a lot of power in a lot of these areas in Mexico, especially Highway 57. So we all knew that. That's what we do, right? That's the intelligence that we gather there. But my bosses ignored that, man, and I challenged the assignment. After hearing this from our coworker in Monterey, I'm looking at my boss, my supervisor, and like, what are you doing? I said, why don't we fly these boxes in?
Sure, there's other alternatives.
We already shut that down. Why don't we drive it in through our diplomatic pouch, truck? Oh no, we already shut that down. So apparently all of this had already happened even months before. And so in the law enforcement world, you have to be briefed. And I had never been privy to any of the briefings. I was never part of any of the meetings. I was never part of any of the arrangements, if you will, that were taking place since December, January, up until this date. I had no idea.
Wow.
I was brought in exactly in the way I just told you. By come in and I need you to go do this. And by the way, I need you to go do it tomorrow. And so I'm like, this is not right. So then I basically made my supervisor go knock on the door, because the deputy attaché and the attaché were in the office, at the attaché's office. And I said, knock on the door and let's tell them what we just heard from our counterpart in Monterey. And he does. And I'm standing right there, and it's all the old chain of command, literally right there. And he knocks on the door. The deputy attaché comes out, and my supervisor tells him what I just told you. And my deputy attaché, and I quote him in this book, and I'll quote him until I die. He said he was unaware of any security issues in Mexico. And I told him the whole fucking country of Mexico is a security issue. And I'm sorry I say that.
No, not at all.
But that's, I have to use that language because it was kind of incredulous to me.
It had to be like,
dare you say that when Mexico is considered a critical level 4 in security, just like Afghanistan, just like Baghdad. As a matter of fact, when I was at the State Department and getting screened to go through to Mexico, and you're there with everybody's going all over the world. Hey, where are you going? I'm going to Singapore. I'm going to Canada. I'm going to, Middle East. The people that were going to Baghdad were asking me, where are you going? I'm like, I'm going to Mexico. And they were like cringing. What does that tell you? They're like, oh, shit, going to Mexico?
That speaks volumes right there.
I'm going to Baghdad. At least I'm going to the green zone. I'm safer than you are. But just to kind of tell you, but that's how dangerous Mexico is. Anyway, so he says that, and he says, I need that equipment by close of business day tomorrow, shuts the door. And my boss looks at me, my supervisor, and I'm like, he says, okay, your order, your order. So I get on the phone with Monterey and I said, all right, man, I don't have time. Just so you could give you a little bit of background. Every time we did this, I had to do an operational plan. I had to get the Mexican military or the Mexican federal police and US law enforcement and other armored vehicles to go in a convoy to do this.
Yeah, you're
Every time.
not just hopping in a car
No,
typically
no, no, you don't get in a car and just go.
and zooming from point A to point B. That's not
No,
how
no,
it
no, it
works.
doesn't work that way. And that wasn't afforded to me. Like, you take Jaime and you go. And that's it. I don't have time to arrange this or set up with anybody. And so I called Monterey and I said, okay, I'm looking at the map, right? They're up here. We're down here.
That was a question. What's
It's
the
about an
distance?
11-hour drive.
Okay.
And I said, okay, I said, you guys come here. And they're like, no, you come up here. Anyway, so we're trying to negotiate where to meet. And I said, okay, we're gonna head out from 6:30 in the morning. I meet Agent Zapata. I exchange back then we used the Nextel radios a lot. We had the encrypted codes. We exchanged the codes. I said, go to my apartment because I live in the northern part of Mexico City, so we could avoid all the traffic and just hit north from there. Jaime shows up February 15th. By the way, it ruined all my plans on February 14th with my wife, all that. I wrote
I can imagine. Yeah.
about the book in the book about that because it was kind of like the cherry on top. And
Right.
I apologized profusely to my wife, but I said my wife was actually like, what's going on? Even my wife was like, this is not right. Like, isn't the regional security office supposed to know about this? Isn't like the ambassador? I said, yeah, but my bosses ignored the alert. They ignored all that. They didn't notify anybody. And so Jaime shows up at my apartment. We go in my armored Suburban that I was issued, that I've been driving. I was the only one that ever drove that. And we head off and we make contact with our counterparts, our agents, ICE agents. There's a bunch of boxes. We switched the boxes over. We made the exchange at kilometer marker 100, which is we happened to drive a little bit more than they did. And it was a little restaurant there. We opened the hatchback, and then these armored vehicles have an additional door, armored door, and we packed. There was a lot of boxes. I was actually surprised. I mean, it covered the whole cargo area of the Suburban. Not only the third row seats, but the second row seats had to be lowered to accommodate fitting all the boxes. It was a lot. And
Sounds like quite a bit.
Yeah, so we switched it over, used the restroom there. It was about 11:30 in the morning. I asked Jaime if he wanted. The lady from the restaurant was really nice. She says, I could make you something. Jaime says, no, I saw a Subway that we had passed. I said, I want to eat Subway because there's this big rest area that has a Subway, a Church's Chicken. And Jaime was very taken aback. I said, this looks like all the US. I said, yeah, it's the same. It's just a little different, you know, but he says, okay, we'll go eat at the Subway. And so we exchange the equipment. They leave. We are now heading back south. We get to the Subway. We eat there about 1:30, I think it was. Beautiful day, 72 degrees. I tell Jaime this is one of the perks of working over here. The weather's beautiful. It's February 15th, you know, and it's right in the middle of winter, and it's a beautiful day. And then I threw him the keys after lunch and I said, all right, get on it. You drive, help me drive. I was looking for a fugitive. I was putting together a human trafficking conference in Mexico. So I had a lot of stuff to do on my BlackBerry. And I said, I'm going to take advantage that while you drive a few hours, I will get to work. We were about maybe 5 hours from Mexico City. And I told Jaime, when you get into the city, we're going to be getting there at rush hour. Mexico City rush hour is from 7 p.m. to about 9 p.m. And I said, you'll just pull over and I'll take it from there because I wasn't going to do that to you with that traffic. It's horrific. Plus, Jaime had never driven an armored vehicle. And I told him, this is the opportunity for you, at least on the open road, to get used to the weight. This Suburban weighs almost 6 tons. It's 11,000 100 pounds. It's very heavy. You could tell if you've never driven a vehicle like this, it takes extraordinarily longer time to brake. It takes a lot longer to accelerate. The doors are extremely heavy. It handles very differently when you turn. And so it does take some getting used to. The vehicle is equipped with lights and siren and a PA system. Is also equipped with a aftermarket GPS tracking device that they had installed. As a matter of fact, I was the last one to get installed because I was always traveling. And it was a GPS tracking, a toggle switch that if you hit it, it would send a signal to an office in DC that would give them your GPS coordinates to
In
see
Washington, D.C., right?
in Washington, D.C.
Yep,
to
for
see
the
where you were
listeners.
at
Right.
if you were in distress. It was a distress signal. And we tried it and we tested it. When it worked, that was months before, but it's a red light. It had the three little yellow lights, a red light, a green light, and a yellow light. And it was red for the last several months. And I told my supervisor, hey, the GPS thing is red, it's not working. They would install these things, but there was no follow-up for maintenance. The same thing with the Suburbans. There were really good Suburbans, but they needed a lot of maintenance. And we didn't have a contractor in Mexico City to service them. We were taking them to our regular mechanic who didn't know much. Like the handle from the door needed the brake. We would go through brakes once a month because
Wow.
Mexico is very hilly, and these cars are
Wow.
so heavy that I would beg headquarters to send me $600 for brakes because I was on metal to metal, and so a lot of those issues that I know you understand. But we had to
Sure.
deal with that. Plus, the Suburbans didn't fit in Mexico City. They didn't fit in the garages. They literally did not fit on the street um, that vehicle shouldn't have been there. Now, they're good for Juarez. They're good for Monterrey. They were good for the open areas in Mexico, but not for Mexico City. Nevertheless, those vehicles are not used anymore. But anyway, so we're driving back. Jaime's driving. I send my location. I call my supervisor, telling them all this. And we're working. And before you know it, we get passed by two SUVs. And Jaime gives me a heads up and say, hey, did you see this vehicle? I look up and you could see the silhouette of a long gun sticking in between the occupants in the back seat. And I said, I just let them go, man. Who knows who they are? And they just passed us. And before you know it, we're up on them. They had slowed down dramatically. Like, I
So
don't
they
know,
sped by you.
they sped by us. It's a
And
2-lane, by the way, it's a 4-lane highway split by a median, two north, two south. We're on the far right lane. These guys pass us. And then before you know it, they slow down like till 25. So think about it. You're on an interstate and you slow down to 25 miles an hour. Well, you're going to start blocking traffic. Well, that's what they did.
right.
We came up on them and immediately they start conducting a rolling roadblock where the one SUV is in front of us. The other one is adjacent to us, right next to us, and they push and stop simultaneously. And Jaime is avoiding the collision from the front and avoiding the collision from the side. And at one point, there was we're like, what the hell's going on? And Jaime tries to kind of maneuver in there and get away from the positioning, and then they reestablish it again. But the second time, the SUV next to us, so we're on the far right lane, they come next to Jaime, they lower the windows with AK-47s, mirror to mirror, and they're literally, shouting, pull over, stop, stop, pull over in Spanish. And I tell Jaime, go, 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 but we can't. We're blocked in by the SUV in the front, and they eventually do this to where we come to a complete stop on the right shoulder of the highway. About 8 of them jump out, and they kind of do a semicircle here in front of us with all of them with long guns except the main guy. Main guy, I tell you, because now we knew he was like the hit squad, the leader of the hit squad. We didn't know, by the way, at the time that they were Zeta Cartel members. And
Okay.
if you're imagining these guys dressed in camouflage and all black, they're not. They were dressed in t-shirts, jeans, very clean cut, very thin, very military, very short, They didn't have anything on. They were not wearing black caps and hoods and no.
Sure,
Just
not
like
like you see in
street
the
attire, cities, street
Mhm.
attire, very clean, very fit, very soldier, southern Mexico. I would describe him as southern Mexican, Central American type looking individual. The guy with the handgun comes around Jaime's door, and he's holding the handgun and opens the door. And all of us were shocked. He was shocked. Jaime was shocked. I was shocked. But Jaime instinctively, not even a second, as the door swung open, Jaime grabs the handle of the Suburban and swings it right back and shuts it. And boom, start hitting that lock button. And the guy's yanking at the door. And now it's locked. And they're yelling in Spanish with vulgarities. Open the door, get out, open the door, get out, get out, get out. And we're like this, by the way. We have our hands straight up in the air this whole time. And I'm yelling at them. We're not who you think we are. You're confusing us. I said, whoever you think we are, we're not that. We're not them. We're U.S. Embassy employees. We're Americans. We're U.S. diplomats. Look at the plates. It's a diplomatic vehicle. We're
So it was clear.
Americans. Very clear, very clear. And I'll explain to you how clear it was. Don't let me tell you because forget me to tell you, but it was very clear. At that time, I didn't know. I was just yelling it at the top of my lungs. And so mass confusion. I even told them, let me identify myself with my diplomatic passport. Let me show you that whoever you think we are, we're not. Because there's a lot of incidents in Mexico where DEA agents, FBI agents had been held at gunpoint. And as soon as they identify themselves as US federal agents, the bad guys kind of go, oh shit. And then they leave them alone. There was this underlying protection that, oh, the cartels don't want to mess with US law enforcement and blah, blah, blah. Well, all that doesn't matter anymore. But they didn't here. They didn't. I kept on telling them over and over and screaming them, and we have our hands up and screaming. And before you know it, well, first of all, the guy with the handgun at one point shoots several rounds towards Jaime's door and like towards the front tire. And boom, boom, boom. And it was kind of very surreal to think, did he just freaking shoot at it took me a while to assess that and to kind of register it. I remember very clearly because I guess I was in denial. It was like the couple of seconds of denial. Like, did he actually pop off some rifles?
Is this really happening?
Is this really happening? Because I think at that point I still thought these guys are gonna realize we're Americans and they're gonna let us go. And nope, before you know it, two of them came to my window. My window was rolled down about 2 inches. So during the whole commotion, we actually lowered the window without knowing. With the lock buttons and the window buttons are very near each other there on the door. And the armored windows, by as it is, they lower very little. They lower maybe a quarter, and they lower very slow. And there was about maybe a gap, 2-inch gap, and they came in. And when they came to my side, they stuck a gun and a AK-47 rifle right here. And I immediately just kind of braced myself, and I raised the button. Hit the button, and I raised the window, and it caught the barrels of both guns. And this guy's wiggling the handgun literally right here. And I see the guy with the AK-47 kind of going like this with the rifle, trying to, undo it from the window. And the boxes are literally right here, right? And we're like this, and without notice, they just opened fire into the cabin and striking Agent Zapata multiple times on his side. And Agent Zapata yells out, I'm hit, I'm shot. And I'm telling him, go, 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 go. I don't know how many rounds they shot, but they shot a lot of rounds in there. And in between the whole, I grabbed the handgun, and it just seared my index finger, and it just peeled all my skin from here because the gun was really hot. I don't know what I was trying to do. I was just trying to make it stop, I think.
Sure.
And then they pulled the guns out, and I just raised the window, the little left, and they just were shooting at it. And I told Jaime, go, go, go. And I put the Suburban in gear, and he put his foot on the gas, and I pressed his knee on there, and we crashed the vehicle in front of us to get out of that X to try to get back on the highway. But Agent Zapata had been injured severely, had been shot severely, and was becoming quickly unresponsive. So the Suburban literally went from the far right shoulder of the highway. We crashed, and then I tried to get it through, and it drove on the highway into the median. It really crossed the freeway, and then I tried to get the steering wheel to get it back on the highway, and that's where it stayed. And it was disabled at that point. They had shot it up over 100 rounds. They stopped counting over 100. As a matter of fact, I have the ballistic reports where they check every single intrusion of every single bullet from the
Sure.
undercarriage everywhere. There's over 100 rounds, and Agent Zapata's severely been shot. I see that he's been shot severely, especially in his leg. And I'm attending to him. And in the middle of all that, I see one of the SUVs take off. And then I have limited vision because armored vehicles, armored windows, bulletproof windows, they turn to, on the outside, they look like snow globes. On the inside, it does this basically. It does this, and
Okay.
it's very difficult to see. And so I'm kind of looking through the crevices, and I see an SUV through the front windshield. It takes off, but then the second one takes off, and it does a U-turn and comes and stops right in front of the Suburban. The two of the shooters come out. They look at me, and they stand in front of the hood of the Suburban, and I look at them, and they just open fire. And you see the pictures online. I think there's some pictures in the book
Hmm.
where the two globes where they're trying to penetrate the bulletproof glass, and it bubbles. On the inside, it starts, if it's flat, it starts bubbling in, and eventually it'll give way. Eventually they keep on shooting the same spot. I'm just here because they stopped shooting, and by the grace of God. And so I kind of froze there. I see them run back into the SUV and then take off. And then I've been shot once in my chest at this point, and twice in my left leg. I didn't know.
And
People
that's what I
passed.
was going to ask. You referenced Jaime being shot. At what point did you realize, hey, I've been shot as well?
I didn't know until I got on the phone with the embassy. So I get on and I talk to, and I'll tell you how I found out, because I just didn't know. I was cut a lot from shrapnel and glass from my face, and had a lot of blood on my face, and I had a lot of cuts on my face, and then I had Jaime's blood on me because I was trying to contain the wound in his leg. And I get on the next cell phone. It didn't work. I get on the BlackBerry, and I call and people could hear this call online. I call the embassy switchboard, and I tell them it's Special Agent Victor Avila with ICE. We've been shot. We've been shot on the highway. Call my supervisor, da da da. And then they switch the call over to the regional security office, which is a diplomatic security special agent office. And then they get on the phone. There's a friend of mine that got on the phone, and I told them at first, like, I was just going crazy, English,
Understandably
Spanish.
so.
Yeah.
Sure.
And so then a friend of mine, a coworker of mine, got on the phone. The ICE office is on the opposite side of the RSO office. So they ran to the office, and they got on the line. And while I was making all these calls and, attending to Jaime, he's the first one to say, you got to check yourself. You shot. And I said, no, but I have a lot of blood. I don't know. And he says, I need you to physically take your hand, because he used to be a paramedic, and to kind
Okay.
of do this. And I actually did that when I saw my wound here, like, holy shit. It was blood just coming down towards my jeans, and my jeans were soaked. So I said, you need to put pressure here. And then I saw my left leg, and I said, okay, I'm done here. He says, take off your belt, take off your belt. I took off my belt, used it as a tourniquet, I cinched it as hard as I could, and tied it as hard as I could. And I stayed on the phone. I called the only person I trusted from Mexico was the head of our vetted unit in Mexico City. He was able to deploy a helicopter to
Hmm.
come get us. And you see, in Mexico, you don't call 911 and the police show up and they rescue you. You have to call certain people
Sure.
because there's a lot of corruption. And I want people to understand that, like, well, why don't the local police show up?
Right. You've got to be selective.
You gotta be very selective. You just can't. There's a lot of bad guys. You can't tell the difference just because they wear a uniform, you know. And
Right.
so it took 40 minutes. It took 40 minutes. It's a
And
long, long
that
time.
had to be excruciating. I mean, that is an eternity.
Is an eternity, eternity. Eventually, the helicopter landed there on Highway 57. They put me and Jaime on there, took us to San Luis Potosí, the city and the state by the same name, to the hospital there. I was petrified, Jim. I was so afraid because I thought I was a dead man on that helicopter because I knew I investigate these cases. I worked it. I was in Juarez. I knew what we were doing. These Zetas don't leave survivors, and I know they
Right.
kill a lot of people at hospitals, especially survivors. And I thought this is what they're gonna do.
So
And I
it's
was
not getting better at this point. You're going
no,
through
no,
that
actually got
incident
worse. That's
and
what
it's
that
getting worse. Yeah.
people are asking. People ask me, if I was afraid during this. So I didn't even feel fear. I went through all the stages. I will tell you, I went through the fight, flight, and freeze. I went through all that, but I never felt afraid. I felt afraid when I was going to the hospital, but scared is doesn't do it justice. I use the word petrified because I couldn't find another word to describe the level of fear that I felt that I was gonna die and they were gonna kill me at the hospital. That's how I showed up at the hospital. So they took Jaime into one trauma room. They take me into another. The hospital doesn't know that we're United States agents. They think we're Mexican
Okay.
police, which was
Okay.
good in a sense. And I didn't give them my name. I didn't give them my nothing, nothing. I didn't tell them anything. I refused an ID. I thought they were gonna kill me, and I was on the phone with my friend, and I was begging him because there was a few police officers there. I had no idea who the hell they were. I need you to send your people, the trusted people. And it took a while. It took about maybe within the hour they were there, or maybe less. I don't remember, but I was in. They were cleaning me up. They're cutting my shirt and my jeans and all that. They were kind of confused as to why I wasn't really letting them. I was letting them treat me, but not really letting them like
Right. Not
chemicals and
exactly.
stuff, you know. And they're like, "Why is this guy being resistant?" And eventually, the heavy duty guys show up. And I remember, like it was yesterday, the double doors swang open. This heavy duty SWAT guy comes in and he says, "Victor Avila?" And I said, "Yes." And he says, "I'm here on direct orders of Commander, my friend, from Mexico City." And he says, "You are secure. This building is under our control and you're okay." And that's the first time that I breathed a sigh of relief. And then I told the hospital who I was. I told them I'm an American. I'm a U.S. special agent. I'm a U.S. embassy employee. I'm a diplomat. Blah blah blah. And they're kind of like, "Oh shit,"
Right.
And so they did very good care. I gotta tell you that, incredible care, sonograms and this and that, and I mean a lot of stuff. Um, and so the shooting happened at 2:15 p.m. The first American showed up at 7 or 7:30 p.m. So I was desperately wanting to see an American.
Right.
It was an ICE ERO friend of mine from our office, the ERO guy. Um, uh, Good guy, man. When he showed up,
That had to
oh
be a
man,
relief.
I tell you, I cried because I told him, "Man, you're a sight for sore eyes." And it was just incredible to see them. And then eventually everybody show up, Americans and police and press and all this stuff. And a lot of weird things started happening. The government of Mexico, it just goes to show that you're not in the US and you got different laws. They have different constitution. It's not the same as the US. All of a sudden, I'm being detained. Jaime's body, he had already passed, is being detained, and we're not free to leave. So are we under arrest? Well, they didn't want to use the word arrest, and they're like, so then my diplomatic immunity comes into play. I have a very low level of immunity. There's different levels of immunities. Not everybody has the ambassador obviously has the ultimate protection, right?
Mhm.
And then there's different levels. I probably have one of the lowest ones. They're color coded in different tiers, if you will. But nevertheless, I'm a black passport holder. I'm a diplomat, and I have a protection. And like you can't search me, you can't search my bag, certain things like that at the airport that we can afford those that comes along with being a diplomat. Well, they were kind of ignoring that at the hospital, the Mexican government and the U.S. government. They kind of got a little powwow there, and then they said, "We gotta get you the hell out of here."
Right.
and and they did. DEA let us borrow their plane, and the embassy
Hmm.
doctor that came in with the crew said, "Victor, I gotta bring you down, man. Your blood pressure, and you have extremely high blood pressure right now, and your heart rate are through the roof. This is at 8 o'clock at night, and it's still my adrenaline was still going. I was still in that fight mode,
You're on
and
overload.
he says, I'm gonna give you some pills. It's gonna make you groggy, maybe even knock you out, but I need to put you like this so you can make the flight to Houston." And he did. I said, all right. And he did. And I remember, getting put on the plane and then flying to Houston, and got into Houston really early in the morning, where I went to their trauma. The surgeon in Houston knew the doctor that treated me in Mexico. How crazy is that?
Wow.
They had been in a
Small
conference,
world.
a medical conference together, and he told me, you were in very good hands. And he actually agreed with him on the bullet in my left thigh, which is still here. Agreed with that doctor not to take it out. He says, I'm just going to leave it there, man. It's too intrusive to go in there, and we don't want to cause any more damage. So we're just going to leave it there. It's going to encapsulate with scar tissue. And it did. It's still there 13 years later.
Wow. Wow. That is amazing. That's amazing. How long was once you got to Houston, how long were you hospitalized?
I was there for another day, and then all the arrangements were being made with my family to extract them from Mexico because, as you know, we're always listening to chatter,
Mhm.
and these guys in the GPS that I had, they knew the apartment and the address, and they didn't think it was safe for my family to be they say we just got to get them out. And so they initially took my family to a hotel that was surrounded by US and Mexican forces there, protecting them. And then they put them on a CBP plane. So about a couple of days later, we reunited after I got released from Houston in El Paso.
Wow. Wow. That's amazing. What, how does your family react to this? This had to be absolutely shocking to them.
It was shocking. And let me tell you, there was no buffer with my wife because my wife was working at the regional security office when the call came in. She was a background investigator, a contractor. She was literally 5 feet away when the call came in, and from the switchboard to the regional security office. The secretary, who was a temporary, didn't know what to do, so she put the phone down and walked and literally ran down the hallway and said, "There's a special agent Avila on the phone that he's been shot." My wife came out of her office and said, "What did you just say? There's an agent Avila on the phone. He's been shot." She didn't know that was my wife. And my
Mhm.
wife goes into distress,
Oh,
and well, that's my husband. And they grabbed her. She fainted and was throwing up. And so it was a very difficult situation. There was no way to, soften her into it. She knew from the get-go. And then my kids, we didn't know what to tell them. We told them there was a gas leak in the apartment and they had to leave. It really tests you when it comes to your parenting and all this. Like, what do you
sure.
do? What do you say? And so
How old were your kids at that time when the incident occurred,
10,
roughly?
10 and 4, I think. My daughter was
Okay.
10, my son was 4. So they were young.
Okay. Sure. Absolutely. I remember when that happened, again, being an HSI agent. Also, when we heard that happen, it was disheartening. It was sickening. We were shocked. We wanted to react. Like, what can we do to help? Like, it was just unbelievable. And, I just want to say, I know there are people out there that that have never talked to you about this, but they feel so much for you. And they look at you, both you and Jaime, as, as I get older, I use this term less often. Heroes. You were thrust into a situation like that, and you come out, and I look at you, and I think I mentioned this to you before in our prior conversations. You are a hero to so many HSI employees, to so many DHS employees, to law enforcement in general. Again, when it happened, coworkers, I'm a federal agent. I work with many, just like you, state and local law enforcement, and they heard about this, and it resonated throughout the entire community. And we were just aghast that this happened to two HSI agents, to two United States citizens in Mexico. So I just wanted to relay to you that I'm sure you're aware, but if you are not, there are so many people out there that are so proud of you for the way you endured an incident like this. And as I was thinking about today, I had a recent guest on a podcast that he was a SEAL Team 6 operator. And what we talked about was the inner drive that an individual has. They either have it or they do not, to not only experience an event, but to overcome that event. And as I thought about this, like, you have what that Navy SEAL was describing during his episode. You have an inner drive. You had it and you have it, this inner drive and desire to survive and overcome a scenario like that. So I just wanted to mention that to you.
I appreciate that because I think the true test was, believe it or not, as horrible as the shooting was and as traumatic that was, it was the aftermath that was the toughest for me. People ask me what was the worst. The worst was the aftermath because the aftermath continued for years, and it made the life of mine and my family's miserable. And I couldn't, the hardest part was to understand is why am I being treated like this? I didn't do anything wrong. Why are the tables turned like somehow I did something wrong? And it's very, very difficult, emotionally, mentally, physically, all these things, PTSD, all these things, when you think, hey, and then you start hearing, not everybody, by the way, Jim, I really appreciate your words because it means a lot. But I got a lot of the opposite. Fucking Victor, what does he want? Blah, 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 all this stuff. And I'm like, hey, what's going on? I didn't ever ask for anything special. I just wanted my family and I to be taken care of normally, what you would do. But they didn't
Right.
know what normally was because this had never happened. And so because it had never happened, there was no code in the stupid reimbursement book of the term that I hate a lot is there's no funding mechanism, Victor.
There's no funding stream code for this, Victor.
All right. Oh man, Jim, that. Oh man, I tell you that's a trigger right there. No funding. Oh, by the way, we get moved to DC, and we agreed. Let's go. We can't be in the border. They don't want me anywhere in the border. Let's go to DC or Northern Virginia. Okay. Well, I need to put my kids in school. This is February 20th or something, 25th, around there. And my kids need to go to school. It's snowing. It's freezing. My wife had one bag to pack, and she didn't know it was like shorts and t-shirts because it's 72 degrees over there.
Sure. One
So
extreme to
all of
the
a
other.
sudden, we're buying jackets and and school bag and backpacks. And think about, you left your house and you're never gonna go back ever. What do you need? What do you need tonight? Well, how about a toothbrush?
Right.
How about, let's start there. So I put it to people that way because it's a little angering, and it's very, very difficult because from day one, when I showed up to I went up to I stayed at my parents' house. We didn't know where to stay. I went to my parents' house, and that wasn't, we only were able to stay there a few days because the media in El Paso got there. We had SRT outside. My mom's feeding them burritos. It's fucking chaotic, man. It was
Sure.
weird. It was weird.
I can imagine.
And financially, boom, the money starts coming out. Well, we need this. Well, we need that. And it got to a point where we didn't have. They left us in an apartment in a hotel at a Residence Inn for 2 weeks in Washington D.C. and the phone. Whatever you need, Victor. Well, I needed a lot of things, and my kids couldn't get enrolled in school because they don't take a hotel address as an address.
Mm,
So an apartment, I had to
wow.
look for. I mean, and so I'm talking about logistical
Sure.
everyday life that continues. The bills are still owed. You still have to move. You still have all these things, and all of a sudden, everybody's gone, man. And it's very, very, very difficult. And that continued on for many, many, many years. And I saw in my career what the federal government could do. I'm not an idiot. I understand what can be done. As a matter of fact, I saw it done many times to people that hadn't done shit in their careers. And I tell you
Right.
very frankly, because you're a friend of the directors, because whatever. And even then, I
100%.
thought, you know what? They're gonna put me up here, whatever, take care of me. Victor, you'll be, I don't care what. There's 1,000 things they could have done for me and taken care of me and put me there. And I would have been a very happy, productive member of HSI to give back still. Because that's what I wanted, by the way. That's what I wanted. I just wanted to go back to work. It's,
Get back
that
to it.
mentality, which
Sure.
initially I did. About 6 months after, I'm walking, I feel good. I'm good. I'm like, I tell my doctors, I'm ready. And I literally force them to clear me. And they clear me, and I get a call, and they said, hey, there's a supervisor position open in Madrid. And says, you want to go? I say, I want to get the hell out of here. I don't want to be here, because we were in the foreign setting mode anyway. And I said, okay, so go in there and ask him. And I didn't even ask. I went and told my director, I said, you're going to send my family and I to Madrid. And he said, okay. And then we, in August of 2011, we showed up to Madrid. And I just wanted to get back. Now, Madrid is a true diplomatic post. But guess
Sure.
what? There's a lot of drug trafficking and human trafficking and a lot of shit going on, because what do? I'm a worker. So
Right.
I start scratching and I start working, and I'm having a good time. I started doing some human trafficking conferences. We covered Portugal, start engaging Portugal, start engaging the intelligence community there. And 8 months into it, Jim, one day I didn't want to go to work. One day I woke up, and my wife's like, what are you doing? You're running late. You're gonna be late. I said, no, I'm not gonna go. I'm not going in. And she says, are you sick? I said, no, I just don't want to, I don't feel like going. And she's like, what's wrong? I said, I don't know. I don't want to go. And I didn't.
Hmm.
And I fell into a very, very deep depression. And what happened to me is that the PTSD just boom. Literally, the way I just explained it to you, that's the way it happened to me. And as a matter of
Wow.
fact, my counselors had told me, he said, Victor, you have what they call severe complex PTSD. By the way, I've never been a PTSD of a danger to myself or danger to others, because there's
Sure.
very different types of PTSDs. But my
Absolutely.
agency didn't want to know that. They think that PTSD, everybody's going to kill somebody or kill yourself, and that's just not the case. My PTSD was anxiety and depression driven, and physical pain, a lot of it, and especially with my wounds. To this day, I've actually been hurting yesterday and today a lot from my hips.
Wow.
I have a doctor's appointment on Monday, but anyway, it was it's just the way it happened, and I needed some time off, and I tried to seek help, and DHS didn't give it. I actually ended up paying for my own counselor, and I found one in Madrid. And so all these things that people don't know about, I was trying to. I never opposed it. I was like, I know this has happened to me. I never in my life knew what depression is. I never know what, and so I struggled with identifying. I read books on it. I wanted to educate myself of what was happening to me. I gained a lot of weight. I was losing hair. It was very, very stressful, man. It was horrible, dark years. No sleep, night terrors. I mean, horrible, until eventually I got a notice that we got kicked out of Spain. Got a 3-hour letter saying you get kicked out of Spain and pick a
Oh,
city to
wow.
go to. And so I fought that, lost that battle, and they said, here we go again, moving my family. So I wanted to go to San Antonio. I want to go to different cities. They shut them all down. It ended up being either Tampa or Denver. And so we ended up in Denver.
Wow. Wow. That it, from our previous conversations, Denver is a nice location,
It was
right?
nice. I'd worked there. I'd had some cases there, but I never lived there. And actually, believe it or not, it was a good office. I never actually really worked there because once I got there, I was a lot of weird things happened to me. I was active, I was on the payroll, but my law enforcement sign, think about that, Jim. Your law enforcement, Alpha 2156 was erased. It was erased.
You're
My
kidding.
my email was deleted. My DHS.gov email was deleted. I didn't have access to the computers. And then a few months into it, I wasn't going into the office, but I was getting paid. And then eventually they sent me and said, we're gonna go pick up your car, your G-Ride, and all your equipment. And I gave it to all them. And they said, will you pick up your guns? I said, go take all your shit. I said, we're gonna take your credentials. I said, you're not, I'm not giving those up. And
Right.
the agents that came to my house, I said, I'm not gonna give you my creds, guys. And they said, we're not even gonna ask them of you, Victor. I said, well, I wasn't gonna give them to you. You would have to kill me right now to give you my creds because I earned those. They
Sure.
wanted to take my creds from me. I didn't do anything. I didn't
Right.
do anything. I got shot. That's what happened to me.
Victimized once again.
But Fast and Furious weapons were discovered that were part two weapons used against us were part of Operation Fast and Furious. And so maybe it was that. I don't know what maybe because we sued the government. It's my right. That's our right. This is how this government, this is how our system
Absolutely.
works. And so I wanted accountability. I want to know why the hell they put us on that highway, why they made this decision, why all that went nowhere. All of it was dismissed, no recovery, nothing. And so maybe it was because they were mad because I sued them. I don't know what it was, but nothing ever happened. We filed FOIA, never got anything from the FOIA. We got a bunch of blank sheets of paper, redacted sheets of
Sure.
paper, that's for sure. At one point, they got us a lot of internet clippings of the stories. And so that nightmare of the procedures and the workers' comp and man, it was tough. And so in 2014, late 14, middle of 14, I was like, I can't handle this anymore. As a matter of fact, the agency is the one that's causing most of the stress. I need to see how I get out. And I was right shy of 20 years of service. So I inquired and I sought a early retirement. And an early retirement would have been good because they calculate your actual time and they give you based on, and I had 19 years, 8 months, something like that.
Oh man, so
And so they would
close.
have given me my retirement based on the service. And they denied that. And so I called, I was talking to a congressman that I know, and he's the one that said, have you ever thought about a medical retirement? And I actually, believe it or not, I had never thought about a medical retirement. I still didn't even
That
see
just shows
myself.
that shows your mentality, your work ethic. You didn't even you went through that. You were shot. And you didn't even think about that.
I'll tell you what, I had 1,000 hours of sick leave, and thank God I had to use them because they wouldn't pay me. So I had to use the sick leave to recuperate. But thank God I had 1,000 hours because I never called in sick. And so,
Hmm.
so eventually, I started the process for the medical retirement, and you have to go through Social Security. That's a nightmare. If anybody's ever dealt with Social
I
Security,
don't wish
I'll
that
tell
on
you,
anybody.
that was like a 5-month process. Well, guess what? Social Security comes back and grants me disability? And they said, yes. Okay, so I'm like, great. I'll just pass this on to, no, 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 no. ICE does their own. Even though they don't, you give them the social security information and you give them all these medical everything, and then ICE makes its own determination. Well, ICE said, okay, we will medically retire you. Now it goes to OPM. And then OPM is the true one that actually says if you're medically retired, and it sometimes takes them 18 months to 2 years to make that decision. And they give you what they call a CSA number that they received it. And I send them everything, Social Security, ICE, a box full of documents.
Sure.
And then I called the congressman and he sent a congressional inquiry. And in May, within 45 days after that congressional inquiry, May 1st of 2015, I was medically retired and separated. And believe me, that was probably the best thing because it relieved a lot of the stress that the agency was putting on me because they didn't want me back. And I was the last one to figure out that my agency didn't want me back. And let me tell you, that hurt me because I was still a very loyal federal employee. I was still that guy thinking, hey, I did good. They're gonna put
Sure.
me here. No, no. I was the last one to realize, like, wake up, stupid. They don't want you back. You're never gonna be a special agent ever again. They're not gonna take care of you. So you have to do something else. And there's a really emotionally, I struggle with that because I identified as a you know this. This kind of job, this kind of career is an identity that is stuck to you, whether you want to or not. This is with
Right.
my family, with my friends, with people. Oh, the guy he carries a gun and a badge. That's the way they see you. I don't care what anybody thinks. And it's a huge identity. It is a huge identity marker. And so I had to kind of go back and say, well, I know that that's not just me. That was my career. And it's very difficult for me because I really enjoyed my job. So when they tell you you're not going to do this ever again, I struggle with that. And so I came to the realization that that's going to happen. And so what do I do? What do you do? I retired and medically
Right.
retired. Like, what do I do now? So that's when I started looking at writing the book, and I got together, and believe me, from nothing, from zero, I started researching, networking, and got into the literary world because I didn't want to self-publish the book. I wanted the book to be published, and I still thought some publishers, here you go, Victor, here's some money. We're gonna write the book, and you're gonna no, that doesn't
It's not
happen.
how it works, huh?
I spent almost $20,000 to write this book, and I didn't care. It was a work of labor. It was hard work. I had to pay the publisher. I had to pay the editor. I had to pay all these people to get this work done. And I'm very proud of the book. It's very raw. It's very honest. If you read this book, it's very honest. When I read it afterwards, I'm like, man, this is pretty
Sure.
personal.
Yeah.
It had to be. It
Yeah.
had to be personal because that's what it was.
Yes. It's an outstanding book. And speaking of the book, how can listeners obtain a copy of your book if they're
You could
interested?
you could grab one at Amazon. If you don't want to go through Amazon, you could go through my website, agentunderfirebook.com. And there's a Liberty Hill Publishing. You want to go directly through them. But I also have the links through Amazon there as well.
Okay, great. Yeah. And the book is, on my back screen here. So that's the cover of it. For listeners that would be interested in that. It's disheartening to hear that the government treated you in that manner towards the conclusion of your career. But you hit the nail on the head. I think it was great that you removed yourself from that situation. You had spent essentially 20 years of your life dedicated to that job. You did a fantastic job. You dedicated everything to it, and that stress came from the employer, and removing yourself from that situation sounds like it was the best thing to do. And you're on to bigger and better things. The book, myself, I've got it. I've read it a couple times. My circle of friends and former coworkers, they have it as well. So I for one, and the people I know are very glad that you did pursue this book. So I appreciate that.
Thank you. Well, thank you. I wanted the story because, oh, you could imagine the rumors, you could imagine, you know, it all comes back to you, right?
Right.
And people were
Right.
saying some crazy stuff, man. And some of it is very hurtful. Some of it is very hurtful. Some of it is very blaming. So people would say things like, well, how did you survive? Why is Jaime dead and why are you alive? As a matter of fact, one time I spoke at a conference early on, and somebody asked me, why didn't you die? And it hit me because no one had ever asked me that question. And second of all, why didn't I die? And I struggled with the answer when the answer was very clear. But sometimes, you know, in your life, sometimes the most obvious answer is the hardest one to find. That's
Hmm.
what happened to me because I started thinking, shit, well, why am I alive? I went through the survivor's guilt, a lot of it. And the answer was, I'm a faithful person. I believe in God. And that was the easy answer, is because that's the way God wanted it. And God kept me here for a reason. Then I said, okay, I came to grips with that. But then you said, well, what's the reason? Well, what am I supposed to do, right? What is am I well, then believe me, through a lot of therapy and a lot of, you know, thinking about it, maybe it was just to see my kids grow. Maybe it was just for them to have a father. It was as simple as that. It didn't have to be so complicated. But in the type of person that I am, I said, I got to be able to contribute some way, somehow. And so I started speaking about it. I still speak about it. I do a big PowerPoint presentation about it to a lot of police groups. And believe it or not, the response that I get is not so much about the actual shooting and what we talked about today, but the aftermath, Jim. That is what people want to hear, because people struggle in their lives with many other things. And Agent Under Fire took on a different meaning slowly as I was speaking to these groups. It kind of turned into, what are you under fire? Are you under fire at work? Are you under fire at home with your spouse? Are you under fire with a family member? Are you under fire financially? And so it took this whole different thing, that we all have different kind of traumas. It doesn't have to be in the line of duty shooting like the one I went through. But my message to the people is that it always has a solution. And the reason why a solution exists is because we're alive. And because we're alive, we're able to get to that solution. When you're dead, you're dead. If you die, or if you think about taking your life, or you think about stuff like that, that's not the solution. The solution is because we're alive, we're able to get to that solution. And I tell people that I'm an example of that. I'm very fortunate. I give a lot of credit, obviously, to God and my wife, that I didn't have a vice, like I didn't become an alcoholic. I didn't use drugs because that's not my thing. It's never been my thing. But I got accused of it. Oh yeah, because people accuse you of all these crazy things. I'll tell you what my vice was food. I ate a lot. I love food,
I
man.
can relate.
And I gained a lot of weight, and then eventually got that into control. Like, man, I can't, gained a lot of weight. I would eat a lot. And that was my
Sure.
coping mechanism, was eating. But I'm very, very grateful for the support. I tell you, my wife, if she had a reason to leave me before, she definitely had a reason to leave me. She could have said, I'm done with this guy, man. This guy is,
Right.
and she didn't. And I also give credit to my kids, as they were in that very vulnerable age, growing up, where
Very impressionable.
they were the perseverance, the maturity that they showed. They went to 9 schools in 2.5 years. It is
Wow.
that's hard for anybody, even
Sure.
military kids and all. It's very hard in these circumstances. And I use the word resiliency a lot, and they're very resilient. And it brought us together. It made us a very close family. I include my kids a lot more than my parents include. When I grew up in a Hispanic family, I didn't know shit. I didn't know what the heck was going on. I didn't know what the mortgage was. I didn't know what, because that wasn't my thing, right? My parents kept that separate. And now I include my kids in what we're doing. And my wife and I, we dabble in a little bit of real estate. And so I teach my kids now about real estate, and I teach them about what we're doing, they're part of the family. They live here too, you
Right.
know?
Sure.
And so it really opened up a beautiful relationship with my daughter, will be 24 on Sunday, by the way. My
Wow.
son's a freshman in college, and so
Happy
we've been
early
very,
birthday
very
to him.
fortunate, very fortunate.
Good deal. Hey, let me circle back really quickly. You had said, hey, remind me to mention something when we were talking, and I just wanted to throw that out there. You may
It
have covered
was,
it already. We were talking about it was pre-shooting incident, working up to that.
yes,
And I
yes.
was confident you probably covered it, but
I
I just
probably
wanted
did. I'm trying to remember what it was, but I hope I did. I hope I did
um
say it.
let
Because sometimes I'll say that, but there's a lot.
let
There's or not. I want people to know that there was the thing that we haven't talked about a lot at all was the criminal case, and that put a
yeah.
lot of stress because these guys were caught, were extradited. Oh, this is what it was. Now I remembered the reason when I was yelling that we were Americans and that I always felt, and for a second there and a lot of times I questioned me and I doubted myself if in fact they had hurt me. Like, did these guys actually realize that we were I told them over and over in Spanish we're Americans. Well,
Mm-hmm.
they testified to it at the trial in 2017 in Washington, D.C. These scumbag evildoers had never in my career had a scumbag corroborate my story, but they did, Jim. They said, "Oh, we've heard him. We heard the guy."
Really?
As a matter of fact, they said that they heard me so loud and clear that they thought I was the ambassador to the United States ambassador. So there
Wow.
was no doubt that these guys knew that we were Americans. Now, did they want to kill Victor Avila and Jaime Zapata? No. Did they know that we were Americans and wanted to kill Americans? Absolutely. Was this a carjacking? No. No way. Because that's what you're going to hear. Oh, they wanted to carjack. No, they destroyed the hell out of that Suburban. This is the shit that the criminal cartels have conducted and have evolved in Mexico. They're not the same that you and I investigate. They're not the same. These organizations are terrorist organizations, I believe. They should be designated as. I write about it in the book. By the way, the second part of the book, you're going to get a decent border briefing. If you have no idea what's going on with the
Oh yeah,
border,
it's relevant
a
today.
good
The book is
you're gonna
relevant
get a what's
today.
going on today. You think I wrote it
Right.
yesterday, all information is in
Right.
there. And one of those is about the cartels. And these guys, they're not afraid of US law enforcement. They're not afraid, and sorry, that's my dog in the back. They're not afraid of US law enforcement. They're not afraid of Mexican law enforcement. They're not intimidated by anyone anymore.
Mm-hmm.
That is a big game changer because we always kind of relied on that, right? Well, they kind of respect
Exactly.
U.S. law enforcement and Border Patrol and ICE and DEA and FBI.
That's
Those
gone. That's
days
out the
are over.
window.
Those days are
Yeah.
over. These
What
guys, no one.
what was their mindset? Like what was the purpose to assassinate Americans?
I think for them, it's control, it's power. It's power, it's control, it's dominance. And which better way to show it than to kill two American agents? And that's that's they had killed Border Patrol agent Brian Terry with Fast and Furious weapons 2 months to the day right before our shooting. And so this was the like my friend Jason Jones says, this was the tripwire. This was if you look at the timeline of the cartels, especially from the 80s into the 90s into the 2000s, and you study the cartels because that's what I've done, that's what I do. You see the evolution of them coming from gangs to criminal drug trafficking organizations to what I believe insurgents to now being terrorists because these guys run a parallel government in Mexico. These guys are not just involved in narcotics anymore. They're involved in obviously the fentanyl and all that, but they're moving in the movement of humans and human trafficking, the human smuggling plus politics. You know that 37 politicians, candidates were assassinated last year in Mexico.
I didn't
37.
realize that.
Can you imagine if that happened in the US?
That's
A
astronomical.
guy running for mayor in Chicago or in Fresno, California was assassinated, and then another one, and then another one, and he had 37 candidates from Congress all the way to local politics assassinated.
That's outrageous.
Well, the same thing with the media. They had the most media journalists killed in Mexico. So Mexico is the most dangerous country for a journalist to work in. Not Syria, not the Middle East, Mexico.
Wow. Unbelievable. What would you feel comfortable discussing the conclusion of the trial or the court process?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Let me tell you, because this was very stressful for us because we dealt with the court, the testimony, the trial. 8 of them. So it was 8 shooters. One was presumed dead. Like they died in Mexico. They couldn't find him. His body was gone. So it was 7 of them. 7 were extradited. 5 of them, they were all facing the same charges: murder, attempted murder of internationally protected person, and weapons charges. 5 of them pled guilty to those charges, and based on the guidelines, they were facing the death penalty. But because we have a treaty with Mexico, we removed the death penalty from the table in order to extradite them because Mexico doesn't have a death penalty. And so now they're looking at life imprisonment. So when they pled guilty to those 5 charges, I expected them to be sentenced to life. Well, the U.S. Attorney's Office, our own government, gave them a deal and departed from the sentencing guidelines. From life, they departed down to 35, 34, 28, 25, and 12 years. Yes, you heard that right. They sentenced these guys. 5 of the shooters got those sentences because of their substantial cooperation, which is I used to work for the courts. And they forgot that I used to work for the courts. And I know the sentencing guidelines. I know 5K departure because I used to do that all the time. And I had never in my career, either as a federal probation officer or as an agent, ever seen that type of departure in my life.
That's outrageous.
For killing a U.S. federal agent.
Right.
You and I make deals all the time with these guys, with the U.S. attorneys. That's what we do. But it's because we're going to get another drug case, because you gave up this guy. These guys didn't give up shit. All they did was testify a little bit about what they did. And it was very, very disappointing. 2 of them did not say a word, did not cooperate. They rolled the dice. We went to trial, and they were found guilty on all those charges, and they were sentenced to life in 2017. Well, great. That's the only, by the way, when you go look it up online, that's the only press release you're going to find. The 2 that got the life sentences. You're not going to find anything on the 5. If you do, Jim, please send it to me because
I'll forward that to you.
It doesn't exist on the internet. If you find it, that's not reported.
Yeah, if I find it.
2 years later, in 2019, I get a message from the U.S. Attorney's Office that the 2 guys that got sentenced to life and at Supermax in Colorado appealed their sentence, and we're going to be they appealed the sentence saying that the murder conviction that the U.S. statute used to convict him of the murder of Agent Jaime Zapata was invalid because a murder happened extraterritorially, meaning it happened outside of the United States, and therefore you cannot use that murder statute, even though we have used that murder statute many, many times, and there has been precedents in other circuits kind of already dealing with that point. But politics get in the way. The D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals agrees with them and dismissed the murder charge. And in 2019, I get that horrible call saying that the murder charge is dismissed. So these guys are no longer in custody for the murder of Agent Zapata. They're just there on the remaining charges of the attempted murder. And so I had to call the Zapata family because I was the one that's kind of in the middle, communicating between back and forth and them. And it was devastating news. So I was in my truck. I remember getting the call, and I made friends with a lot of the congressmen and senators and stuff. And I said, I'm gonna call them. I mean, we need help here. What do we do?
Mhm.
So I did. I got on the phone, and they said, this is nuts. I said, yes, it is.
Right. It's
So
insanity.
we got to change the law, and we did. And so it took 2 years, but we changed the law, and so this can't happen to anybody ever again. It wasn't retroactive to our case. However, we did pass the Jaime Zapata and Victor Avila Federal Employee Protection Act, Federal Law Enforcement Employee Protection Act. And it was signed by Joe Biden and Nancy Pelosi, even though she blocked it twice from hitting the floor, if you could believe that. It eventually got to the point where she couldn't block it anymore. We had bipartisan support, and it passed. It's up here on my wall. It's signed by them. That's the bad part, but
Mhm.
life is weird, and
It
you know what?
is.
I didn't care. We passed it, but here's the thing: they passed the law. I get the call. Senator Cornyn from Texas says, "Victor, we got it. We're going to pass it. It's going to sign. Biden is going to sign it in a little ceremony. You know how they get in front of the desk with the people behind them.
Sure.
Do you want to go?" I said, "Heck yeah, I want to go." And he says, "All right." I said, "Listen, despite the politics, I respect the office of the presidency, and this is beyond politics. This is important, right? And I want to be there for this." Well, the invitation never came. It never came for me, and it never came for the Zapata family, and we were not present, even though it has our name on the law. It's our name on it, and it was very
Yeah.
that one hurt me, Jim. That one hurt me because it opened
Uh,
up wounds, and I know
sure.
why. Because they probably looked at me and said, "Oh, this guy doesn't align with us politically." But who cares, man? This is about a
Right. Let's put that
life and
aside
service of an agent.
and address the issue. That is, again, I hate to keep using this word, disheartening. That is disheartening to hear. But, just know what you did and what happened there. So at least that it happened. It's unfortunate that you were not invited to that. It's mind blowing to even hear that, but in the end, it's something important that happened. The end goal there. Well, let me ask you this. Can you tell, like, what is Victor up to now? Like, what are you doing now?
Well, so I started the book. I
Mhm.
started speaking about it, and so I go around speaking. I speak about border security is my life and national security, and I'm a subject matter expert in human trafficking investigation. So I talk a lot about that. I started speaking. I started dabbling a little bit into politics. I ran for Congress. I didn't get in. I figured, man, I want to give back somehow. I want to give this knowledge that we have. And I started going on the news a lot and doing these, what they call news hits on Fox, on Newsmax, on OAN, on Telemundo Spanish. I was doing Spanish. I still do them. This past week was crazy. I do a lot of hits, radio, podcasts, and I want to keep people informed of what is happening, especially for the last 3.5 years. Man, I go to the border a lot. Organizations will seek me out, and because I know the border very well, and I'll take them to Eagle Pass. I just got back from Tucson, Arizona. I was there. I'm going to El Paso in a couple of weeks, and so I work with a lot of nonprofits and really educating the people about what we're facing here. And for me, it's the bigger picture of public safety, of national security, of illegal immigration, and all that big picture. Mexico, I'm a big follower of the politics in Mexico. The correlation between Mexico and what's happening here today and who's president in Mexico, like China, Venezuela, Cuba, Iran. Yes. I interviewed these people, by the way, Jim, when I was in Mexico, people from Bangladesh and Syria and Yemen. I'm like, what the heck are they doing here, man? It was
Sure.
scary. It was scary. And
Oh,
so
yeah.
I want to share my experience. I stay on top of this on a daily basis when it comes to borders, cartels, all of this stuff. And that's what I've been doing. The Congress thing didn't work out for me. I really want to. I've been in public service since I was 22 years of age. That's you and I. That's all we knew, right? We were public
Yeah.
servants, And I figured, well, I'll be a public servant. I'll go back. Remember, they said you can't be a special agent, but there's other ways to serve. There's other ways to serve. And I figured Congress was going to be a good way for me to get in there. And I really, in my career, Jim, I always, especially when I was in El Paso and I was a young agent, I started realizing the decisions that were made in DC didn't really kind of coincide with what was happening in the real world, right?
Right.
And I'll tell you a perfect example. We had the Nextel radio phones. We love those things, man. We communicated with each other. We communicated with the bad guy. We communicated with the sources. That was our lifeline. They took them away and they gave us Verizon phones. And someone in DC said, oh, you know, they don't know.
Right.
The other thing, like with the vehicles, they didn't know because they've never been to Mexico. They've never been to the border. So they don't know. They don't know what it looks like. Sometimes these, I take these candidates, other candidates that are running for Congress or other offices to the border. And just by them standing there, that alone, and that's all they need.
That's very
Just to
eye-opening.
look at the terrain, just to look at just to feel the heat, just to feel the whatever. It makes a difference. And that's what I try to do. I try to explain it to people. I try to convey it. I'll take you down there and show you. And that's what I've been doing. And now I'm working with I'm part of the team with Border 911 with Tom Holman. Is a nonprofit educational purposes of going and educating the country of the crisis that we're facing with the truth. We're actually nonpartisan. We actually tell you exactly what's happening. We're here to tell you and educate you how now, like we were just in Chicago last night, how you are being affected locally. And this is the big change now that people all of a sudden they're seeing it at their doorstep. It's no longer just on the border states, it's in every single state.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I'll follow up on that. Again, working in the interior of the United States, in the Midwest, not in the borders. When I talk to friends or family or just citizens about what goes on, about what we investigate, and I mentioned terrorism, trafficking, narcotics, gangs, they are shocked to hear that that is going on right here in our communities. And it's just amazing the lack of knowledge that some folks have. So I would applaud you for what you're doing and encourage you to keep doing it. You know, sharing that information, sharing the expertise that you have, and keep, you know, you have a drive that will never stop. Keep serving the community. And you know, I think that's
Especially
a
now
great
because
thing.
it's so fluid. It
Yeah,
changes. Even when I go down to the border, I'll go down and one time and then I'll go back 2 weeks later and it's different already. And I'm like, what the heck? It was that different. It's changing. And so I want to keep people abreast of how it's changing, how much it's changed in the last 3.5 years with the policies and the permits. And I want people to understand, and I try to explain it to them in a very basic level so they can kind of get a good grasp and understanding of how they're being affected and how there's an economic impact, there's the healthcare impact, there's a school impact, there's all these type of places that are being impacted, diseases, and there's so many things. It's not just the illegal immigration, but to me, it's the public safety, it's the fentanyl that's killing Americans, it's the crime that is being committed from people that are not from here against us. That to me is almost intolerable, man. I cannot tolerate.
right.
We have a big crime problem in this country to begin with, and then you have to accept that more people are coming in here illegally and then committing. Not all of them. I'm the first one to tell you. I know that, but
Correct.
many of them are, and they're horrific crimes. And I want to be able to be part of the solution for that. And so that's what I'm doing. I even created a pack. I created a Border Patriot Pack to help me do this. So if you go to Border Patriot Pack, I'm plugging something here,
Sure, absolutely. Please
borderpatriotpack.com.
do.
Yeah, if you go to borderpatriotpack.com, that's your donation will go exactly to that, to identify candidates that will do just this that I'm telling you. And it also would, I'm going to be a resource for them. I'm going to brief them because all these candidates that are running for office around the country, they're all saying I'm for border security, but they really don't know. They really don't know what they're really understanding. And so I want to brief them. I want to bring them to the border, and I want to show them, and then they could take that information back to the district and really inform them, and so that we could get good people in Congress and get this rolling the way it used to be.
Yeah, good deal. I agree. Let me, I got to mention one thing. I read something in your bio that really intrigued me, where in 2020, you set the world record for the longest handgun shot.
Yeah,
Tell
I
me
think
about
was it
that. Tell us
2020
about
or 2022? I forget the year. It might have
you
been
know,
2020. That might have been. I forgot
okay,
the year, Jim. But as a matter of fact, I'm wearing their hat today. One Shot is a company, a USA One Shot, invented a device. It's a stabilizer. It's a piece of plastic, and you should see that if you go to their website, you'll see it. It's hard to
sure.
describe, but you see it, and you shoulder your handgun. It's not attached. It's not an attachment. It's not a brace. It's just basically a stabilizer. That's what I used. And they invited me to come shoot. And I was like, what in the world is this thing, man? It's a game changer because if you're not a pretty good shot, this thing makes you an incredible
I
accurate
need to
shot.
get one.
You need to get it is a game changer. And so at one point they said, all right, we're gonna kind of exaggerate here and we're gonna kind of we're gonna set up and they did in Nevada in a salt flat in eastern Reno area. We went out there and they set up the whole thing. We were up about 100 feet and they set up this whole thing with radar detection, GP, all these things to get the record. And it was a 36 by 36 inch metal plate. I used a 10 millimeter handgun, a Tanfoglio Hunter. It's a big gun with a big scope on it. I had a spotter behind me. And there's video, by the way, if you want to check out the video. If you go Victor Avila, world record handgun or something like that, it'll pop up. You'll see the video.
Okay.
And and yeah, I hit it. It takes 11 seconds for the round to hit the target, and it's with this stabilizer, the USA One Shot. It's a cool device. This company wants to put in the hands of all law enforcement. It's an additional tool. It's only weighs 11 ounces. You could Velcro it to yourself. You could clip it on your belt, but police officers now they don't have access to the long gun all the time. It's
Sure.
in the vehicle. And if you have, God forbid, an active shooter situation at a mall, at a school, or something like that, they always have their handgun. And if they have this device on them, you bring this thing up, and this thing, I'm telling you, 100 yards is nothing. You
Sounds like
hit,
it could be a game changer.
yeah, that's why it's called One Shot, because you get that accurate. You will hit that target. I got the red dot on my gun with the One Shot. It's like bing, bing. Like I'm shooting 75, 100 yards. I could never shoot it like that with just,
Sure.
without anything. So it is a pretty cool device. And so I consult with them and they're getting into other things, but that was the world record back then.
I'm glad I asked. That's super interesting. Well, hey, I've taken enough of your time. I greatly appreciate it. Is there anything else you'd like to mention or say, or
No, well, your words are very kind. I appreciate everybody's support. Sometimes it was very lonely. It was very lonely days because you don't know, you don't hear that support. Sometimes, unfortunately, you hear the negative before you hear the positive, right? And as I talk to people, some people that I hadn't talked to in years, and I'll give you an example. A friend of mine I saw years after the shooting, he's like, "Hey, are you the SAC? Are you the head of the office?" I'm like, "I don't even work here anymore, man." But that's kind of like the mentality that people thought that, well, wait, well, we just thought you were going to be taken care of and you were going to be okay. And it
Sure.
was quite the opposite. I said, no, it didn't go that way for us. And unfortunately, it might have been politics. It might have been other things that had an impact. Nevertheless, it impacted our family. But I want people to know that I appreciate all the support. I appreciate all the support of everything that I've done afterwards. And I want everybody to know that's I think that's my cause. I think it's my cause to be a voice. I want to be a voice for a lot of the agents. I want to be a voice for a lot of the Border Patrol agents, for the ICE agents, for the law enforcement in general that don't get to use their voice. I talk to them a lot, almost on a daily basis from different parts around the country. And since I do a lot of media, I want to be the portrayer to say, this is what I'm hearing, this is what they're telling me, so people will know what's really happening out in our communities. And I always, I'll leave you with this: be active in your community, do something. People always ask me, what can I do? Well, there is something you could do, and it's not as cumbersome as you might think that it is. It's a matter of actually being a little bit involved in your community. Being aware is one thing. That's great. That's where you start. So you have to be aware. Once you're aware, you'll be surprised. Just by being aware, then everything kind of starts changing because now you're paying attention. When you're not paying attention, and we have unfortunately too many Americans that are not, well, then nothing changes. And I know we all have soccer practice and bills, and I get it. We have life. But I think it's a duty now of what we're facing as Americans to pay a little bit of attention, and that will make you get more involved in your community.
Yep. Well said. I couldn't say it any better myself. I want to sincerely thank you for taking the time to talk to us today. And you said something that really struck a chord with me. You said in our previous conversations, and you mentioned it today, you're more than just a guy that got shot and survived. You are a special agent, you're a husband, you're a father, you're a son, you're a great citizen, you're a true American, and you're a hero. And I appreciate you. Thank you, Victor.
Appreciate you, Jim. Thank you so much for the interview.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you and stay safe. The Right to Remain Silent podcast is brought to you by Streetwise 360 Studios. I would like to again thank today's guest for sharing the story right here on the podcast. Please remember to like, follow, share, and recommend us so that I can continue to bring you high caliber guests sharing their experiences just like we heard today. If your law enforcement agency is interested in training provided by Streetwise 360, or if you know someone that has an interesting law enforcement story to share, please contact me via the website, www.streetwise-360.com, www.streetwise-360.com.